don't have the same sort of women, put them on a panel and then ask them to talk about corporate India. We actually believe in the mashup. So I want to welcome on stage now somebody who's at the top of her game in sports. She's an Arjuna Award winner and an Olympic swimmer. Who am I talking about? Nisha Millet. Let's please welcome Nisha on stage. Hi, Nisha. Come. A bigger applause for our sportswomen there. Come on. Preetha Reddy is the vice chairperson of Apollo Hospitals. Big task. All daughters, 4 daughters running the Apollo group. So that's interesting in an age where this still happens mostly by the sons. Please put your hands together to welcome Preetha Reddy on stage. Preetha, can we have you on? Thank you. Hi, Preetha. Good to see you. Thank you. And last but not the least, a police officer who made headlines for how she handled Sashikala. Remember? Can we please have IGP Rupa on stage? Hi, Rupa. Welcome. Now, I call these 5 women enough of like power circuit to electrify any system. I mean, like that's just like, I don't even know what to say. I'm feeling a bit complexed here. But my moderators, a pretty mighty woman in her own right. We heard from Nirupama, who was the Foreign Secretary. May I please welcome now Lata Reddy, a key voice in strategic affairs, a space still dominated by men. She's been the Deputy National Security Advisor and a senior diplomat. And I'm handing it over to this amazing panel for a very important conversation.
Ladies, confronted by this wealth of talent and achievement, I'm really overawed. But I think we've all been in situations where we've faced audiences, had to talk about our achievements, had to talk about our failures, had to talk about our hurdles that we've had to cross. But I think it's very important we do talk about what we are and what has made us what we are, you know. So the first question I'm going to ask you all is, in your journey through life, and Rekha, I think I'm going to start with you, how much do you find has changed in terms of opportunities for women to be leaders and attitudes towards women as leaders in any field, including yours?
I can talk about my field, which is technology. So when I started off, despite being top of the class in my MBA school, organizations could actually come to campus and say, we don't hire women. The top MNCs, which I wanted to join, actually said, sorry, we don't hire women. From then to now, there's been a big shift. It's a massive shift from then to now. Having said that, the numbers are still dismal. The number of percentage of women CEOs in India is less than 4%. So that sort of is both sides of the story.
Okay. Vinita, what would you like to say about that?
You know, I'd just like to add and say things have changed, but not enough.
Yeah.
I think where we need to be is very far away from where we are. And I also think that, you know, when we talk about women in leadership roles, the default option tends to be the corporates. But I think if we have to look at women holistically across all spheres, it's even more dismal in certain areas. It's better in some areas, but more dismal in other areas. But we can elaborate on that.
Nisha?
Well, I think in sports, we've actually seen the rise of the female athlete, the Indian sportswoman. Right now, instead of hearing about Virat Kohli all the time, all I'm hearing about is, you know, Saina Nehwal, Duti Chand, Mary Kom winning another world championship, being a mother of 3. So I think it's great to see that women are coming and they're actually recognized as the face of Indian sports, which is very different from when I was competing, you know, a good 10, 20 years ago.
Well, thank you, Nisha. Preetha?
Well, I do see a change. When I started, I was young, and from a position of people being condescending and looking at you as the boss's daughter, I think now it's respectful, and they know that you can actually turn a company around or face difficult situations. So I think they look at you as equal partners, which I think is a great change. And even in the home front, I think the relationship between a husband and wife or a man and woman is now on level playing field, on equality, and I think that's a great thing.
Rekha is shaking her
Is
head
that,
very
is that
vigorously.
personal, or I had to say that.
And
Yeah.
Rupa?
From one Kiran Bedi, we have come a long way. There are many women in police, but mere presence is not enough. Whether they are involved in decision making, whether they are given the key posts, whether they don the posts which really matter to the public, where they can deliver and do a lot, that is what counts, and there still things have to change a lot.
Okay, now you've heard the ladies say what has changed, what has to change, why it's not changed. But I want to tell you a little bit about each of these amazing women, and I think you'll find it very, very interesting. I'm going to start with Rupa, saying she's from the 2000 batch of the Indian Police Service, and having been in a central service myself, the Indian Foreign Service, I fully understand the challenges you faced, Rupa. But the most interesting thing about Rupa is she's been transferred 41 times in 18 years. And I think that shows you that she's a woman who's not afraid to speak her mind and will face up to the challenges that have come her way as a police officer. I think she deserves a round of applause for that. And, some of her celebrated cases, I'll ask her to talk about a little bit, and why she felt that, people were unable to take her frank talk and her very honest and upright actions. So, Rupa, why don't you kick that off?
Thanks. This is the only time when transfers get good feelings, the applaud. Else, transfer is always inconvenient, discomfiture. As DIG Prisons in 2017, I gave an expose report as to what was happening in Parappa Nagrahara, Bengaluru prison. And I, along with other irregularities, I had exposed how special privileges were given, flouting Supreme Court orders, rules, manuals, to one so-called VIP, or one lady who was slated to be chief minister of the neighboring state, very powerful. So after this expose report, I was transferred out. But I don't consider transfers as punishment. But nevertheless, it's a good thing that there was so much public support that the government didn't resort to any punitive measure. Otherwise, the knee-jerk reaction of governments generally is to first do away with the whistleblowers or those who, create problems for the system in a good way for the society, but for the system as such. So I was transferred, but vindicated by the Independent Inquiry Commission that gave a report, which was just in line with my report. Now, why I chose to do this? Now, many people said there is something called Bannargudi Mafia. They are very powerful. Don't resort to this, or don't go ahead with this, and so on. There were people who said your career is at risk. Yes, there was very much risk to career. But I don't think this country has reached a level where somebody can just attack an IPS officer and kill him or her. I think I required to do it because I was in a position to do that. I don't think people who are outside the system can do much. Those who are there have to take the action. Otherwise, why are we there? And we get salary from the public account, the citizens' tax amount. And we are accountable to public.
Wonderful.
And we need to be transparent and accountable, and that's what I believe, and I did that.
Thank you, Rupa. Preetha, turning to you. Preetha and I share the same surname, but I assure you we're not related, so there's no nepotism here. But our fathers were very good friends. And I'd like you to say a little bit about what your father meant in your life, and how did he encourage you, the four girls, you and your sisters, to take such leadership positions in his company?
We're like Charlie's Angels, Dad's good daughters. So I was actually not allowed to go to medical school because my dad said it was too tough and wanted me married at 19. And I said, of course, because I thought it was freedom. So I did get married at 19. But when my father started this journey, he really couldn't afford help. So we 4 daughters started off as being cheap labor and helping my dad. But we loved every moment of it. And he did give us, maybe grudgingly in the beginning, but he did give us the space, the respect. And now when there is like a huge challenge or he's got this dream and, he's 86, but he does not stop dreaming. We just did a huge project on cancer for him. I don't think it's ever going to make money, but it was Dad's dream, and so we did it, and he empowered us to do it. Now he wants, a whole village of 200,000, a whole district transformed and to be looked after and kept completely healthy, and we're doing it. So I think the good thing is that, we align with the leadership's vision, which then makes it easy to achieve. And here, I think being a daughter helps. We keep telling him that if he had had a son, he might have had a different way, or he might have stood up to him. But here were 4 girls, and if the dad said, jump off the deep end, we would do it. And literally, that's how we learned to manage or to swim, because he said, jump off, and I will be here to help you and hold you. And none of us went to management school. None of the 4 of us went to management school at all. And we literally learned by, managing as we walked around. Difficult situations, some stupid actions done, but he was always there to say, it doesn't matter, we are in it together. And I think that's what helped.
Well, I think Preetha's being very modest, because I have to tell you, she's regarded as a pioneer businesswoman in India's healthcare sector. She has worked very dedicatedly on both contemporary medical protocols and clinical outcomes. And she's had a long career with Apollo from 1989, if I'm not mistaken, Preetha. And so that's a 30-year career. And she's too modest, and she makes it appear that, all this just happened and, she required a lot of guidance. But I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that this doesn't happen by accident. You have to have fire in your belly, and you have to have a desire to succeed. And she's been ranked in Fortune's 50 most powerful women in business several times. So, Preetha, I think all women have a right to be proud of your achievements. And now I turn to Nisha, our swimming icon, our Olympic star, and I think probably the younger members of the audience would choose you as their icon, because I think what you've achieved, and right now I'm so happy to see sports people getting their due in India, whether it's the women or the men. Now there's a real sense of pride, and particularly when we're competing at world class, winning world championships. And I know you've had a great struggle running your swimming academies. I've been reading a little bit about that in the press. And I think what I'd like to hear from you is, where do you get the motivation to become an Olympic champ? And basically, who have been the supportive figures in your life that helped you to achieve this dream? And finally, how are you going to grapple with these problems of your swimming academies? Thank you.
Well, yeah, I didn't have a perfect start to my swimming career. I was actually hydrophobic, fell into a pond when I was very young. And it's my dad who actually, helped me overcome that fear. So it wasn't one of those stories where I got into the pool and I started swimming like a fish. I really, protested. I know I scratched a couple of my first few coaches. But at the same time, I think my father was the one who really got me to enjoy the water. So I think 2 men who have played a big role, my dad and my husband. My dad, of course, getting me involved in swimming. And like you said, you have to have that fire in your belly. And once I started swimming, I just wanted to beat everyone. The goal was to race everyone. Didn't matter if they were older than me, if it was a boy, and I just wanted to be better. I was never too focused on the gold medals. It was about, always doing a better time. So sometimes I would win a gold medal and be in tears because I didn't get my best time or a national record. And thank you. And of course, from a very young age, everybody wants to go to the Olympics. but the kind of sacrifice that is required, only a few know. Now, of course, there's a lot of funding to sports people. Not enough, but a lot more than we had back in the day. So my parents actually put their house up for sale and used that money to fund my swimming career. So definitely my parents are the ones who deserve all the...
Wonderful.
And, once of course, it took a lot of hard work. Pretty much, I think, no holidays, no birthday parties. I would swim on my birthday, Christmas, New Year. And it was all worth it when you hear the Indian national anthem playing when you're standing up there on the victory
Absolutely.
side. Yeah.
Proud moment.
So it was great to see that sports has come a long way. And good to see many sports people getting back and starting their own academies, whether it's Ashwini or whether it's Gopi Chand. And you can see that's made a big difference, because otherwise you'd have people who know nothing about sports, running sports in India. It still has to change in a large way. But if you look at it, I had a tough time because I had leased out a government pool. And a year before my contract ended, they gave us half a day to vacate,
Wow.
We had 400 people training at our center at that point of time. So just very, very difficult. We did, try to approach people, went on social media. At the end of the day, you realize that I think as a sports person, you have so many failures, so many times you don't meet a target, and you learn just to take it, take the shot in the arm and keep moving on. So it just took us a month to get ourselves back together. I have a great team at my academy, and the idea at the end of the day is to get people, to teach them a life-saving skill. And so we're undeterred, and at the end of the day, there's thousands of pools in India, and we just want to have, get people into the sport, get them loving the water like I do. And at the end of the day, like I said, we want to teach people how to not only save themselves, but even save others as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nisha. Turning to Vinita. Vinita, you once told me your father was a Renaissance man, And so I know he played a huge role in your life. Vinita is a global business leader. She's played key marketing and CEO roles in Cadbury's, Coca-Cola, and Britannia. And we go back a long way together because we broke a little glass ceiling of our own in South Africa. I was one of the first women, I was the first woman diplomat, and certainly one of the first few diplomats to be posted in South Africa in 1994, when Nelson Mandela formed his new government, and Vinita was the first Indian corporate executive to be there. So we share that particular glass ceiling. But apart from that wonderful experience in South Africa, you've had a really exciting corporate career. And you lived in, I think it was 6 countries and 5 continents. So I beat you, Vinita. For me, it was 7 countries and 5 continents.
You beat me by 1.
But after 2014, and this is the interesting life journey which you've led, that you moved out of a full-time executive corporate responsibility to pursue a wide range of interests. And what you've done on nutrition has been particularly exceptional, because she's worked for maternal and child health issues using nutrition. And she, of course, still continues to be very actively engaged on several important boards, both in India. So it's not that she's left her corporate and finance interests behind, but this has, in a sense, become a sort of a passion with you, hasn't it? And I think the audience would enjoy hearing both about your personal journey and what has made you who you are, and your current mission to really rid India of malnutrition.
Wow, that's a big one, so I'll do it in sound bites. You talked about Renaissance men. Preetha talked about her dad. I do believe that we need what I call Dangal fathers and Renaissance men. And the second thing I learned, because I had the kind of dad I have 2 brothers, and we were a very gender agnostic household, in the sense that, there was no differentiation between what my brothers did and what I did. So I grew up with this conviction that actually gender does not matter. And I'm here to tell all of you that as women especially, we've got to change the conversation from gender to competency. And I keep saying, when I walk in through the door, no matter where I'm working, whether it's an NGO, a corporate, a hospital, or anything, what matters is my experience, what matters is my attitude, what matters is my skill set, what matters is my education. gender is the last thing that matters. Because, and here we are talking about leadership. So the second thing I want us to think about is leadership is about behavior. Leadership is a verb. It is not a position, it is not a title, it is not an entitlement. And therefore, leadership, by definition, has nothing to do with gender. And sometimes we are the ones to blame because we keep talking about, women leaders, are they different from male leaders? And I'm saying that doesn't matter. What matters is effective leadership, not the individual, not your age, not your name, not your accent, not where you come from. So I really think that if all of us were to change the dialogue around gender and move it to competency, we will find that we are far higher than where we position ourselves to be. And we must have that conviction and the confidence to do so.
Nutrition?
Nutrition, yes. I can talk a lot about nutrition, but I kind of got into it accidentally. But what I'm here to say is just 2 or 3 things for all of us to remember. We talk about India becoming or having dreams of becoming a 5 trillion economy. We are also talking about an India which in the recent global rankings has been ranked at number 109 out of 117 countries in human development. 42% of children under the age of 5 are undernourished or malnourished. We lose 1 to 2% of our GDP on account of lower productivity because of poor nutrition. And therefore, this great human dividend that we keep talking about is actually going to be a human liability if it isn't already one. We live in a country where 200 people every day sleep hungry. So tonight, 200 people in India will sleep hungry out of about 850 million in the world. So I do believe that each one of us, in our own way, can take care of our own nutrition and the health and nutrition of those around us. Nutrition in the workplace is something that we had a big conference on. All of you either work for somebody or other people work for you. If we start looking at nutrition as part of sustainable economic growth, as part of the basics of humanity, I think we'll see a very, very different world. I'm also here to tell you that 35 to 40% of the food we grow in India is actually lost or wasted, either in storage or in transit. Even if we were to reduce the amount of food wastage each of us experiences, that can go a long way. I'm involved in creating food banks where you can give your excess food to people. So again, there is a lot that can be done, both individually as well as from a corporate point of view. And, do pay attention to your own health and nutrition and that of your employees.
Thank you, Vinita. That's a great message. Rekha is a remarkable woman. And I was very, very impressed, Rekha, when I read about you. And I know you're the chairman and senior MD of Accenture, and I think everyone here would have heard of Accenture. She is ranked as one of the most powerful women in Indian business. She uses her voice for change and exclusion, as well as being a leader in her own field. She's a thought leader, an active voice for social causes and industry influences, and she is featured also in Fortune's top 25 women in business. So, we have like these 3 business icons who've all featured at different times in lists of powerful and successful business women. So it may seem like a conundrum that we're talking about why women can't be leaders when we have this panel, but I think we all understand that we are exceptions to the rule, and we are not the norm. We are women who've broken the mold, who've grown above that. And Rekha, I'd like to hear a little bit about your journey, and we talked about this a little backstage, that how important do you think it is to have a good ecosystem in which women can grow, flourish, and show the leadership qualities that Vinita talked about?
So,
think you'll have to.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so Vinita and I backstage had said we'll disagree with each other, but actually I agree with everything you said on leadership. The ecosystem is really important because what you said is right. The few women that you see here in the audience and here are there despite the ecosystem, have typically gone and broken barriers despite the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is important, and therefore you need men as advocates. You need the story to change where, we're talking about we, the women, and this room is full of women, but where are the men? They are the ones who are still controlling most of the, well, in the corporate world, they're still heads of corporate, and they are the ones who are making the decisions. So till we co-opt them into the system and have them believe that equality is what matters, till then things won't change. And there's enough data to say that, equality actually makes business sense. So it's not a question of the right thing to do, besides being the right thing to do. It is really, enough and more data is now available, which says that, one, when there's equality in the business, which means gender, but also people of all castes, colors, creed, everything, there's more innovation. Financially, those companies do better. Proven that women in leadership have a slightly different leadership pattern, and therefore maybe there's not all the companies that go down, less would have gone down. So the reason is really because of equality. So it's not, and we're trying to make a difference. I mean, we're certainly taking a stand on it and saying we will be gender neutral by 2025. In India, I'm already at 40% women, which has come from less than 10% a few years ago. So
it's 40%.
40% right now.
Excellent. Thank you, Rekha. We only have a few minutes more, so I'm going to ask my panelists to, how do we grow more women leaders? What are the barriers stopping women? Why are there fewer women in leadership positions? Certainly I don't think, though this was one of the questions we were asked, that are women different or less capable? Different, yes. Less capable, no. That's my take on it, And we may bring a different leadership style in certain ways, but I think it's more important to say that we are capable and we can deliver. So I'd like you each to give me your thoughts very briefly. I think we just have a couple of minutes left on the clock as to how you think we can achieve this goal of bringing in more women. Rupa?
By creating idols of those who have already achieved and, putting forth them as models, because they inspire, like, the platforms like these, they inspire women. They make others think that, oh, I can also be there someday in that position. And we have been telling our daughters or whatever, in various roles as mothers, sisters, to be gentle, nice, bear with everything, and so on. Like the Sanskrit shloka goes, what is that? Karaneshu mantri, karyeshu dasi, rupeshu lakshmi, and shayaneshu rambha, kshamaya dharitri. So that means you have to have all these qualities, but I don't think an equivalent being there for men as to what they should do.
Absolutely.
So the last line is, if you want to create history, don't be that good girl which the society wants you.
So, the takeaway from Rupa is be bad girls. Preetha?
So I'm slightly different. I did speak about my dad. I have to talk about my mother.
Yeah.
When we were little girls, and it was hard. My father was just a doctor. So she would always tell us, learn to live by yourselves. Don't depend on anyone. Work really hard, but see that you stand on your feet. And today it's like words of wisdom. And when people are applauding our success, she says, I told you also. Very sweetly and very gently. I have a little observation here, and it's just an observation. We do a lot of work, not-for-profit work, for cardiac disease for children. And I have been finding and collecting data that when it is a child who needs a heart surgery, if it's a boy, the family will find money somehow. But if it's a girl child, they seem to hesitate. So we started a foundation saying Save a Child's Heart. We've done about 10,000, free surgeries on children. 80% of them are girls. Don't ask me why, but that's what's happening. And I work with the Niti Aayog now and the PM's whole healthcare initiative. So I got a call 2 days ago and they said, we're throwing up data which says that women have as much kidney disease as men have. But when we go into the hospitals, whether it's government or private sector or whatever, we find that the women having dialysis is about 20%. And the rest are men having dialysis, and that's the data which is being thrown up. So I said, okay, I will check in the private sector because that's what I do. And I find that, here we stratify the people who pay full price and 50% pay subsidized. In the subsidized, the gap is not so much, but in the full price, for some strange reason, there are more men. I don't know why this data is coming up, and this is for CKD. And so I'm afraid that, while we're talking about no gender bias, maybe for the economically weaker sections, we haven't really broken that glass ceiling. And this has been happening to me over the past 1 week, so I'm just sharing it because it really bothers me. But I don't have an answer yet.
Thank
Can
you.
I add
That's a very...
statistic? Sorry. Can I add a statistic to hers?
Sure.
Because one of the things we do is we work in the skilling space, which
Yeah.
is we provide vocational skilling to people. And for years, it was the same thing, that we were funding and working with not-for-profits, and the recipients were largely men, till we took a stand, I took a stand, saying, we're going to have to change this. Our recipients have to be 50% women. Otherwise, we're not funding and we're not going ahead. And lo and behold, suddenly there was a demographic that was not being touched or being put forward. And this we are talking right out in the field in terms of vocational skilling. So sometimes I think we just, those of us who can and use our voices to call these things out and say that, sorry, this has to be 50% women have to benefit, and that's it.
Thank you. Nisha?
I think it starts from the home.
Yeah.
I think how the conversations that we have with our kids, that's the first thing. Because like you said, when Vinita said, my father never, my parents never told me that I couldn't do anything that a guy could do. They always said if you could do whatever a man can do and do it better. And I have to totally agree. I mean, sometimes my husband says, I don't know how you women multitask so well. So in terms of being leaders, that is a lot of what you need, juggling so many different things. So who says you can't have it all, the career, the kids, the marriage, be in a leadership position. And so I think from a young age, if you tell girls that you can do anything you want to, you can be who you want to, and I think that's happening slowly. A lot of people are having those conversations with their kids. So it's no longer if my kids want to play cricket or football, I wouldn't say, choose something like gymnastics, choose something that's not a sport that's not so manly. I'd say do whatever sport you will, which is not a sport, go for it. So I think start at home, and obviously, like they say, empowered people empower others. So we really need to empower the new generation who's going to, already there's issues with climate change. You see Greta Thunberg, a young girl who's got the world to stop and listen, somebody like her can make a change, then, all of us need to do our little bit, for sure.
Thank you. Vinita?
So 2 or 3 things I want to say. One is that, we are talking about changing the game.
Yeah.
And in order to change the game, we can't be on the periphery. We have to be in the playing field. Yes. And, those of us who are fortunate enough to be in positions of, influence, we have to use that influence fully to ensure that there is equality of opportunity. So we don't compromise on competence, but we do. We are inclusive in terms of gender. So no bias against the men and no bias against the women. I think the second thing really is that women have to stop being apologetic. I think we have to be really clear about what matters to us and, play that game with responsibility. I come back to this whole thing about leadership. And, that means taking ownership. If we don't take ownership for ourselves, then who are we going to take ownership for? We have to stop making excuses. We have to be convinced about who we are and what we can do. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to have a career or has to have a title or has to have, somehow when we talk about leadership, we talk about corporates and we talk about large organizations. we see women every day in everyday roles, taking responsibility and leadership. And on that, there is this wonderful woman from Karnataka, whose name is Timaka, and you can look her up. She's over 100 years old now. But what did she do? She was a poor, illiterate woman who could not have any children. She decided that she's going to plant banyan trees, and she single-handedly planted 600 banyan trees.
Bravo.
She was not looking for she didn't have a title, she didn't belong to a corporate, she wasn't the chairperson of anything, but it was leadership behavior. She took responsibility, she took ownership, she took accountability, and she changed something forever. I think that's what we have to think about.
Thank you, Vinita. Rekha, your closing remarks?
That is so powerful, and it's true. I was just going to say that we all have to take ownership, and just all of you women in this room. I mean, because I can see that this is a sea of young, accomplished women. One, if you could take responsibility not just for yourselves, because each of you are responsible for your own destiny, and let nobody else tell you otherwise. But second, pull somebody else up, because all of us are in very privileged positions, right? So that would be what my ask is.
No, I'd also like to say,
we should also
I think we've been given a little grace
Okay.
time, so we can carry
I
on
want to
with it.
say we should also acknowledge the few brave men who are here.
Yes.
And I hope you're going to take away something from this.
No, I also must say it's good to see men, but also let's put some of this also on the men. Like I know with my husband, I didn't give him a choice. I said, we have twins. If I change one diaper, you have to change one. So I think he's probably changed as many diapers
But
as
what
I
if you
have.
didn't have twins?
He would still change as many diapers as I did. So I'm just saying, put some of the onus on them. You don't have to take over all the burden and responsibility. And like you said, if it's an ecosystem that helps you thrive, it starts at home. And similarly, even if it's at work, give them the same kind of responsibility. So sometimes I have to be away on work trips, sometimes my husband. So I think kids need to understand that mommy is not always going to be there and that dad can do the job just as well.
There's one other thing I want to add. Rekha talked about equality. I think of it more in terms of equity. Because, equality, the fact is very often we are confronted with, but women need to take a break when they have kids and so on. And I say put it in context. In a 35 to 40-year career, even if you have 2 kids, at most you're away for 6 months. What is 6 months in 35 or 40 years? I think we have to stop our corporates and the guys getting away with such dialogue because it is really not factual, it is not based on fact, and we have to confront this, in a manner which is effective. I'm not saying, there's a revolution, but I think we have to put an alternate narrative on the table. We have to put the facts in a different way on the table. And we have to say, at the end of the day, what is it that we are talking about? We are talking about equity, we are talking about opportunities, and we are talking about an ecosystem which encourages everybody, irrespective of gender, accent, ethnicity, religion, anything.
I think we are all here because, our parents supported and never said this is something which boy has to do or girl has to do. I find myself my story similar to yours. But when you're growing up the ladder, there'll be still many more people to say, where if the situation goes wrong, let's say you fail in something, then the attribution theory, they will say if something goes wrong, if there is a man in that position, they'll say, oh, the man was efficient, but the circumstances went wrong for him. But if a woman is there, they'll say, look, I told you before, the woman couldn't handle. So this is where I think this mindset has to change, and let us try for it from homes and everywhere.
I think I'm a bit spoiled because they say, the kind of work we are, which is about hospitals and caring, they say the women do it much better. And we employ a large workforce. But I don't think we could have done what we've done, the 4 of us, if the husbands were not supportive.
Yeah.
I think they're very secure in their places because they're doing what they have to do. And it's not a question of allowing a woman to do what she's doing, because then it becomes condescending, like I said. But to be invested in the family's success, because I think it's being together. If you get married, then you're together for everything, right? So I think the men must get credit. The spouses should get credit. and the children, I guess, for putting up with us, because there's never, every day can't be a good day. And when you go home and it hasn't been such a great day, they put up with us. So I think the family support has been extremely, and I have to say my daughter-in-law is here and she puts up with me too. So we have to give them credit.
I think we're completely out of time, but ladies and gentlemen, brave gentlemen, whom I see, a good friend of mine in the corner there, the great support to Nirupama Rao, Sudhakar Rao. I want to give a shout out to him. Yeah. And so I think all these wonderful ladies deserve our applause. I'm honored and happy to be on the stage with you. And I think we've got to get off stage now because
Wait. We're not done yet. We're not done yet. I think for so many women here, all of you have been role models in your field. And what we try and do at this festival is actually just keep the inspiration levels that high. Because sometimes, and we've been hearing this all day, sometimes people do lose nerve, lose confidence. Sometimes they wonder, can we do it? It's really, really important to have upbeat optimism on this stage. And I want to take this moment to call on stage Shelly Thakral from Facebook. Facebook has been an undaunting partner for We the Women. And I want Shelly on stage, not just as a strong woman leader in her own right, but because we'd like to honor all 6 women on stage with the HER Award. Remember, HER is Hope, Empower, Rise. And therefore, we hope you will all keep rising in your lives. Can I please ask Shelly to do the honors? And don't be stingy with the applause now. You have to clap 6 times very loudly, okay? Lata Reddy, fantastic. Rupa, who proved more than a match for Shashikala. Preetha, like I said, sisters in arms, running Apollo. Nisha, inspiring for women in sports everywhere. And Vinita and Rekha, 2 leaders of our corporate world. Rekha Menon of Accenture. Can we all ask you to come front of stage together with Shelly? Rupa, Preetha, can we ask you to come front of stage? Let's give it up for these extraordinary women leaders. Come on. I hope you felt inspired. And I just want to say, not to be like an auntie here, but if some of you have left work and you're wanting to come back, follow that dream. There are a number of women I meet who tell me, we had to give this up, we had to give that up. All of these women on stage prove that it is possible. So thank you very much for all that you do. A round of applause as we say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, please. Come, front of stage. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.